In Montana, a murdered woman is found stuffed in the trunk of her car. With little physical evidence to go on, investigators struggle to catch her killer. A seemingly healthy 33-year-old woman dies in her sleep. Tennessee police must determine if her death resulted from natural causes or murder. In Ohio, a woman abandons her husband and 2 children. But a routine investigation reveals that her disappearance may not have been intentional. A well-executed homicide can baffle even the most skilled investigator. But forensic examiners look beyond the obvious to find proof of a killer's guilt and expose the elements of murder. Settled in the heart of Big Sky country, the city of Great Falls, Montana is surrounded by the majestic Rocky Mountains to its west and the Little Belt Mountains to its east. On an October morning, a man hiking along the secluded banks of the Missouri River stumbled upon several ID cards. They belonged to a young woman. Concerned, he alerted police. Deputies from the Cascade County Sheriff's Department responded to the call. At the river's edge, they found additional ID cards belonging to the woman.
Susan Galloway.
Police were familiar with the name. 27-year-old Susan Galloway had been reported missing the previous day. Unsure what to make of the findings, officers from the boat patrol were called in to drag the river. 20 feet from shore, they signaled they had snagged a woman's purse. Inside were more of the missing woman's ID and credit cards.
What'd you find?
There was also $100 in cash. But there were no signs of Susan Galloway. Cascade County Police contacted the missing woman's parents and brought them in for an interview. The family was alarmed when they discovered that their daughter and her vehicle were gone. Susan had recently become engaged, and she seemed so happy.
Would tell me anything.
Her fiancé, Craig Smith, was stationed at the nearby Air Force Base.
You did pretty good.
The couple often helped out at the business that the Galloways owned. Susan was a devout Mormon. And though Craig wasn't, he had agreed to convert so the two could marry. The family planned to give the couple ownership of the store as a wedding present. They couldn't understand why Susan would just take off without a word. Veteran detective Ken Anderson was not optimistic.
Well, finding the identification indicated that Susan Galloway did not, in fact, just leave town or drive away in her vehicle without saying goodbye and that sort of thing, because she certainly wouldn't have left her identification and money behind.
Police arranged to interview the missing woman's fiancé.
Hello, are you Craig Smith? Yes, sir.
Craig Smith had no idea where Susan could have gone. He last saw her the night before she disappeared. After leaving a dinner party, Susan dropped him off at his apartment around midnight. He hadn't heard from her since. The detective was curious about a bandage on Smith's hand.
What happened to your hand?
He explained that he had accidentally cut himself with a knife. A few hours after Susan dropped him off, he woke up thirsty. He tried to open a frozen can of orange juice, but was having trouble. He grabbed a knife, but it slipped as he tried to pry open the can. His car wasn't running, and he walked to the Air Force Base where he was stationed to have a medic treat the wound. Police later confirmed he had visited the medic that evening. The search for Susan Galloway was going nowhere. Three days later, a power company employee working at the Rainbow Dam spotted something on a hill across the river. He decided to go check it out. When he arrived at the spot, he found a car that had plunged down the hillside. The vehicle appeared to be caught up on some brush. Police and crime scene technicians were contacted and responded to the scene. A check on the vehicle's tags revealed the car was registered to missing 27-year-old Susan Galloway.
Watch for the evidence.
Sergeant Anderson made his way down the hill. Through the window, he observed a key in the ignition. There didn't appear to be anyone inside. But on the back of the vehicle, he noticed streaks of blood. There was also what appeared to be a footprint on the trunk. Then Anderson took a closer look inside the car.
The rear cushion of the back seat had pulled away from the trunk area, and at that point in time I could see a body inside the trunk of the car.
The woman matched the description of Susan Galloway, and it appeared she had been murdered. Police towed up the vehicle and began searching for clues. Inside the car, technicians found large blood smears on the front passenger seat. They also recovered several shards of broken green glass stained with blood. The exterior of the vehicle was thoroughly photographed. The victim's body was transported to the medical examiner's office for autopsy. The lack of evidence found near the car led police to believe that she had been murdered elsewhere and then brought to the hillside. A dog was brought in to track the victim's scent. A mile from the car, he alerted to a partially dug hole.
Sergeant Anderson, SNR 4, come on up. I think we have a crime scene.
More of the victim's blood was found. It appeared the suspect brought the woman to this spot, finished the kill, and then attempted to bury the victim, but for some reason gave up. The medical examiner confirmed the victim was in fact Susan Galloway. Pieces of green glass from a 16-ounce soda bottle were found embedded in her skull and neck. They had severed her carotid artery, and as a result, Susan had bled to death. Now, detectives had to find out who had murdered Susan Galloway and why. But with few clues and no obvious suspects, they knew it would not be easy. Police in Great Falls, Montana had few clues in the murder of 27-year-old Susan Galloway. The young woman had been brutally beaten with a soda bottle, placed in the trunk of her car, and then sent down a steep embankment. No usable prints were found on the glass or in the victim's vehicle. Hoping to identify a suspect, investigators released details of the crime through the media. A short while later, they got a tip.
He knocked on my door.
A man stationed at the local Air Force base believed he had information.
Asked me,
About what time did he come to the room there?
He said that on the night Susan disappeared, he had seen her fiancé, Craig Smith.
about 2 in the morning.
Smith had come by the barracks in the early morning hours.
What's up? I was out with the guys.
He noticed his friend was carrying a bundle of dirty clothing.
I was out with some guys. What's wrong with your hand?
He also noticed a gash on Smith's hand.
Listen, man, I was out with a girl. And
Smith told him he had cut it with a knife. He was on his way to see the medic for treatment and asked his friend for a ride home after that was done. Smith had also told the airman that he had been out drinking with friends and got stranded.
He had
In fact, he asked his friend to keep the story quiet because his fiancée, Susan Galloway, wouldn't have been happy about it.
been left at the bars.
The airman's story contradicted Craig Smith's claim that on the night of the disappearance he had gone to bed soon after Susan had dropped him off. Sergeant Ken Anderson was suspicious.
It was almost as though Craig was lying about something, and all of a sudden he became the main suspect rather than the grieving fiancé.
Police looked to corroborate Smith's story.
Saying there's no trace of orange.
They located the medic who had bandaged his cut hand.
And this was about that long.
He confirmed that Craig Smith had come in to be treated for a cut in the early morning hours of October 23rd. But the medic recalled thinking that the wound was consistent with having been caused by a jagged edge rather than a knife blade, as Smith suggested.
It was fairly deep.
Though incriminating, the information fell short of proving that Craig Smith was a killer. Now, looking to tie the suspect to the crime scene, police canvassed the nearby area.
I just have a couple questions for you, if you don't mind.
A clerk at a convenience store remembered seeing Smith and Susan Galloway the night she disappeared. And according to the clerk, they seemed to be arguing when they came into the store. They bought a few bottles of soda and then left.
We're going now.
The clerk showed the officer the type of soda purchased by the couple. They were 16-ounce bottles made of green glass, identical to the glass that had killed Susan Galloway. The information was enough for police to obtain a warrant to search Craig Smith's residence. The suspect continued to deny any involvement in Susan's death.
And with the sheriff's office, this is Ken Anderson. We have a
He admitted he and Susan had been in the convenience store that night. And he also admitted that in the past, he had hung out at the area where her car was later found.
And
But Smith denied ever being at the spot where the partially dug hole was found.
geez, what else? Where are
The
they?
place police believe was the kill site.
Are these your corduroy pants?
Detectives collected the clothing he wore on the night of Susan's disappearance.
Is that yours too?
Yes, that is.
Okay, take them.
But the items had been recently cleaned.
Is there a shirt in there also, Ken?
Police realized their only hope would be to link Smith to the sneaker print recovered from the trunk of Susan's car. They collected a single pair of muddy shoes.
Craig, you can go inside.
An examination revealed that the shoes seized from Craig Smith were the same size and the soles had the same pattern as those collected from the vehicle. But that alone wouldn't be enough to prove murder.
He had driven her car a number of times. His footprint was in an irregular place on the trunk, but it could have been there.
Police would have to physically place him at the kill site. And all they had to do that was some dirt on the bottom of Smith's shoes.
And it was our belief that if he had been standing in the area of the kill site, he would have picked up soil. It was very sandy and totally different from the mud and soil at the area where the car was pushed over.
Investigators collected soil samples from various locations where the suspect claimed to have been on the night of Susan's disappearance. They also collected samples from the spot where they believed the murder took place. All of the soil was sent to the University of Montana for analysis. There, geologist and mineralogist Jack Warenberg worked the case.
I was to examine crime scene soils, and there was a open burial site, and there were several other small areas that they wanted to be checked out to compare the soil that was present on the suspect's shoe.
Warenberg observed that the soil samples taken from the bottom of Smith's shoe contained tiny pieces of glass, probably from broken bottles. A microscopic analysis also revealed that the sample contained bits of ash that were consistent with having been produced by copper. The samples collected from Craig Smith's yard and from the path he had walked to the base had no such ash. In fact, only samples taken from the crime scene had both the tiny shards of glass and the copper ash. And the reason seemed simple. A few hundred yards from the crime scene, on the banks of the Missouri River, was the site of a copper smelting plant. Warenberg determined that it was the only area in the county where copper ash appears in the soil. Craig Smith had been at the kill site, something he had previously denied. When confronted with the evidence against him, Craig Smith admitted to killing his fiancée. He said he wanted the Galloway family business, but had no interest in being married to Susan. He was charged with first-degree murder. Based on the information, police believe that on the night of the murder, the couple got into a heated argument. Then, Craig Smith viciously attacked his fiancée. He then dragged her to a secluded spot to finish the job and bury his victim. But when that didn't work, he placed her in the trunk of her car and attempted to send the vehicle over the cliff. Craig Smith was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 100 years in prison. A patch of soil was enough for Montana police to expose a killer's dirty secret. But in Tennessee, detectives must look beyond the obvious in order to find answers to explain a mysterious death. In the early morning of December 23, 1997, Nashville police and emergency workers responded to a frantic 911 call. Terry Robinson said his wife had been violently ill for several days, and now she wasn't breathing. She was pronounced dead at the scene. With no obvious cause of death, detectives were dispatched to the home as a matter of routine.
Well,
Homicide detective E.J. Bernard was assigned the case. 33-year-old Lenora Robinson lay dead on the couple's bed. Investigators noticed a black substance on the woman's shirt and on the pillowcase that seemed to have come from the victim's mouth and nose. It didn't appear to be blood. Perhaps they thought it had originated from a cigarette found next to Lenora's bed. They also found and collected a bottle of Gatorade and a glass filled with the orange liquid. Terry Robinson told the detective that Lenora had been suffering from severe flu-like symptoms for the past 4 or 5 days. In fact, the day before, Terry had taken his wife to a doctor for treatment for a high fever and uncontrollable vomiting and diarrhea. The physician who examined Lenora diagnosed her with a bad case of the flu. He gave her an injection to relieve the symptoms and sent her home. Terry said that Lenora seemed better for a while, but that night her symptoms worsened. He tried to nurse her, giving her Gatorade and medications. But when he checked on her the following morning, she wasn't breathing. Though there were no signs suggesting foul play, police were troubled that someone as young as Lenora would die from the flu. Detective Bernard ordered that an autopsy be performed.
The initial assumption was that it was something to do with the flu or the shot, or possibly a heart attack, brain tumor, something totally unknown to the family members or anyone, the medical personnel on the scene.
Her body was transported to the Tennessee State Medical Examiner's office located in Nashville. There, Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Bruce Levy performed the autopsy. The thick black substance that had come from Lenora Robinson's nose immediately caught his attention.
Well, in this case, the first thing was there had been noticed some black residue on the pillow next to where her mouth had been, which means that something had come out of her body. We weren't sure exactly what it was.
An internal examination uncovered evidence of a heart condition and congested lungs, supporting the idea that Lenora had died of natural causes. Then, Detective Bernard arrived to view the autopsy. He noticed something unusual.
It smells like almonds or candy.
It does.
It was the smell of bitter almonds coming from the body. It was an odor associated with people who have died as a result of cyanide poisoning. Further examination, however, failed to turn up the telltale signs associated with cyanide ingestion. There was no liver damage and no signs of burning in the mouth or esophagus. Toxicology tests on the Gatorade found near Lenora's bed turned up negative for poison. If the 33-year-old woman had been exposed to cyanide, the question now was how and by whom. An autopsy performed on 33-year-old Lenora Robinson led authorities in Nashville, Tennessee, to believe her death had resulted from exposure to cyanide. To prove it, additional tests would have to be performed. The medical examiner collected blood, tissue, and urine samples. The items were then forwarded to forensic toxicologists. To test for the presence of poison, the samples are mixed with chemicals that react to cyanide. If the poison is present, it will turn a bluish-purple color within a few minutes. The tissue samples turned up negative. But Lenora's blood and urine tested positive for the poison. For cyanide to be absorbed in the blood, but not in the tissue, it would have had to have been inhaled. And according to forensic expert Agent Louis Kuykendall, cyanide is most lethal in a mist-like state.
Typically, the person will have convulsions, the person will have stomach distress, but usually very quickly, 30 seconds to maybe 2 minutes, they're into a coma state and then die very rapidly.
Medical examiner Bruce Levy contacted police with the findings.
It's Bruce. Yeah, I have the results on the toxicology on Lenora Robinson. It is positive for cyanide.
But until police could rule out that the poisoning was accidental or suicide, the manner of death would remain undetermined. Detective E.J. Bernard was quickly able to rule out both of those scenarios.
There was no suicide notes. I learned that she would have died within minutes of ingesting the cyanide. Therefore, she would have left something close by. There was nothing close by. Mr. Robinson assured me that he did not clean anything up.
Stormy.
Police believed Lenora Robinson had been murdered. To find out why, they questioned the victim's mother and stepfather. Both agreed that the marriage had been rocky for some time. According to Lenora's mother, the couple suffered from severe financial problems.
Pay these bills with no money in the account.
The small business that they owned and operated together was not doing well,
A credit card. You're supposed to know.
and the bills continued to pile up.
You gotta pay for it somehow.
It had caused a lot of anger and resentment between Terry and Lenora.
Shall we? Let's see, we've got last year.
Lenora, they said, had recently begun talking about the possibility of divorce.
I will be talking to the two of you in the relationship that they have. Did they have
They had
any
one more
arguments?
piece of information to add. Terry, they said, had once worked as an exterminator, and as part of his job, he had worked with deadly poisons.
He didn't have but a couple because before they married, he had.
Before obtaining a warrant to search Terry Robinson's home, police needed to know if it was possible for him to create cyanide vapor.
You'll actually see it in some of the pesticides, industrial pesticides especially. And so
Agent Kuykendall confirmed that the process is relatively simple.
you might go ahead and collect that.
He gave police a list of items to look out for. Armed with a warrant, police returned to Terry Robinson's home. The suspect maintained his innocence. But as Detective Bernard began sifting through the couple's financial papers, he uncovered a letter Lenora had written to her husband. In it, she threatened him with a bitter and costly divorce. With a list of chemicals that could be used to transform cyanide into vapor, Detective Bernard searched the suspect's garage. There, he found several common household items that could have been used. He also collected numerous containers of unidentified liquid. At the TBI crime lab, Agent Kuykendall began analyzing the substances collected from the home. But the results were not what investigators had hoped for.
Essentially what EJ found and sent to me, none of those had cyanide or enough cyanide at any level that if someone was to ingest it or get them on, that it should harm them.
The investigation was back to square one. To make their case, police would have to rely on the circumstantial evidence. And their best bet would be to prove that the suspect had access to cyanide. Detectives contacted Terry Robinson's former employer at the extermination company where he had worked years earlier.
I need your help.
The man confirmed that while Robinson worked there, the company utilized cyanide. In fact, Terry Robinson helped convert the crystallized poison into a liquid state, which would then be administered with a mister to combat insects and rodents.
That stuff smells.
The former employer hadn't seen Terry in some time and wasn't aware of any poison he may have taken with him when he left the company.
That's all there is to it.
Sure.
Still, Detective E.J. Bernard refused to give up.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you very much. Well, I continued looking for the magic bean, we'll say, to where I could get a receipt where he bought cyanide. I was unable to locate that.
Though police had established motive and opportunity, they had no hard evidence linking Terry Robinson to the poison that was used to murder his wife. And without that, Lenora's murder threatened to remain unsolved. Forensic toxicologists in Nashville, Tennessee, had exposed the poisoning death of 33-year-old Lenora Robinson as a homicide. But so far, they had been unable to link her husband, Terry Robinson, to the cyanide gas used to kill her. But then they got the break they needed. Lenore Robinson's great-uncle came in to speak with police.
A few questions, if you don't mind. I believe your name is Roy Blanton.
He recalled that some time ago, Terry had asked for his help in killing wasps that had nested near his home.
Did he pay you for this?
Good to see you. Hi, what we got here?
The uncle agreed and came by the house to give Terry several insecticides and poisons.
One way or the other. Right. Didn't need anything else.
Among the items were cyanide tablets.
Good. Job below. I'll run for it. Sounds good. Anything.
Though the evidence was circumstantial at best, police were able to obtain a warrant for the arrest of
Has
Terry
he talked to you
Robinson.
about any of these chemicals?
On June 30th, police returned to his home and took him into custody. Terry Robinson was charged with the first-degree murder of his wife, Lenora. Based on the evidence, police believe that Terry Robinson took advantage of Lenora's illness to free himself from an unhappy marriage, heavy debt, and an impending divorce. On December 22nd, he made his way into her bedroom and administered the deadly poison. On October 15th, 1999, 49-year-old Terry Robinson was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 51 years in prison. To trap a killer and make their case, police in Nashville had to rely on both hard science and dogged determination. But some predators have an intimate knowledge of law enforcement tactics. And outwitting them can be a difficult challenge. With a population of less than 8,000 residents, Belpre, Ohio is regarded as a friendly, tight-knit community. And when someone goes missing, it's everyone's business. On September 19, 1996, Jack McCready came in to speak with Belpre police.
No, actually, I didn't.
Investigators knew him well.
So after work, I came home and her car was
McCready was a respected officer with the Ohio State Police.
Oh, yeah.
And now he wanted to report that his wife Jennifer had disappeared. He said he last saw his wife that morning as they were getting ready to go to work. Jack said he hadn't noticed anything unusual about her behavior that morning. Though their marriage had its problems, he thought things had improved.
There you go.
Thanks.
All right, I really got to get
He later learned that Jennifer never showed up to work that day. Jack suspected his wife had been having an affair, and now he feared she had taken off with another man, leaving him with the couple's 2 children. Detective Dave Garvey agreed.
When he got home, the first thing he saw was Jennifer's wedding band on the kitchen counter. He checked the house and found out that there were certain items of hers missing, luggage was missing, and the photographs was missing.
Though police had no reason to suspect foul play, they agreed to look into the case. They began by questioning the McCrady's neighbors. One believed he had seen Jennifer leaving the house that morning. Around 10 a.m., he saw Jennifer's Blazer back out of the driveway and screech down the street in an erratic manner. The neighbor admitted that he never actually saw Jennifer's face.
Okay.
But he knew the Blazer was her car, and he had never seen anyone else drive it.
All right, thank you.
Then, a few days later, police received a call that a vehicle matching Jennifer's Blazer had been located in a parking lot. Jack McCrady was dispatched to the scene, and he confirmed that it was in fact his wife's car. Investigators searched the vehicle's interior. They found no obvious signs of a struggle or any indications of foul play. Still, the vehicle was impounded for a more thorough analysis. Crime scene technicians scoured the vehicle using luminol, a chemical that can detect invisible traces of blood and other biological evidence. But after hours of processing, the examination revealed nothing to suggest that a crime had taken place. As an adult, Jennifer McCrady had the right to be missing. And having found no evidence that she had met with foul play, Belpre police had no choice but to give up on their search for the young mother of 2. Detectives in Belpre, Ohio had found nothing to suggest that the missing wife of State Police Officer Jack McCrady had met with foul play.
Yes.
All indications suggested the 30-year-old mother of 2 had simply packed up and left town.
The vehicle that's out there now.
But then, friends of the missing woman contacted police. They were concerned something bad had happened to Jennifer McCrady. Jennifer, they said, was dedicated to her children. They were her life. No one who knew her could believe that she would just walk out on her children. And no one believed she was having an affair, as Jack McCrady suggested. But Jennifer had been talking about divorcing her possessive and jealous husband. Then, a witness came forward with information. She said that around the time of Jennifer's disappearance, she saw a police vehicle driving in a remote area a few miles outside of town. The officer fit the description of Jack McCrady to a T. The woman had provided unreliable information in the past, and at first, Detective Dave Garvey didn't believe this would be any different. But when no additional leads surfaced, detectives decided to drive out to the secluded spot where the woman had seen the patrol car. There, they found something that seemed out of place.
What we can do is...
It was a dirt mound. They shoveled away a few inches of dirt and hit a vinyl cloth. That was followed by the unmistakable smell of death. Crime scene technicians were quickly dispatched to the scene. As the excavation continued, the team unearthed a comforter and a sleeping bag. And wrapped inside were decomposed remains, the head covered with a white plastic trash bag. When the bag was removed, one of the officers identified the female as Jennifer McCready.
What we want to do now is...
She was wearing pajamas. That was at odds with her husband's claim that when he last saw her, she was dressed and leaving for work. As a matter of routine, soil samples were collected from the makeshift grave. Technicians collected the bedding and the sleeping bag for a more detailed analysis. The victim was transported to the medical examiner's office for autopsy. The medical examiner determined that Jennifer McCready had died as a result of a gunshot wound to her head. The fatal .357 Magnum bullet was collected and sent to the crime lab. Belpre investigators now had a homicide on their hands. The inconsistent information, in addition to witness testimony, pointed to State Police Officer Jack McCready as the prime suspect.
I've got some bad news for you, Jack.
Detectives arranged to speak with him at the barracks where he was stationed.
You understand?
When they broke the news about Jennifer's death, he was visibly shaken.
You guys as a family, at this point...
But as they began to
I think
question
it'd
him,
be best,
McCready asked for an attorney and ended the interview. Soon after, Jack McCready was put on leave. Investigators hoped the forensic evidence could tell them more. All of the items collected from the crime scene were sent to the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Apprehension Lab for analysis. While processing the evidence, criminalist Michelle Yezzo discovered dozens of synthetic fibers. She also located strands of fiberglass clinging to the inside of the sleeping bag.
Finding the fiberglass insulation within that sleeping bag was something that was very unusual in my opinion, because that would be very itchy. And because of that, that's not something that you would want to have in that sort of context.
Police obtained a warrant to search the McCready home.
Let you look it over. Take a look at it.
In the bedroom, they found linens that matched the comforter the victim had been buried in. Several fibers were also collected for comparison with those recovered from the crime scene. In the kitchen, police located a .357 Magnum revolver, the same type of gun used to kill Jennifer McCready. As the search continued, investigators found and collected newly installed fiberglass insulation in the couple's garage. The material appeared identical to the insulation found in the sleeping bag. Then they noticed another potential clue. There were numerous shovels, and some were coated with dirt. Though McCready explained that he had recently done work on his yard, police confiscated the tools. Now, forensic examiners began analyzing all of the evidence. Michelle Yezzo found that the carpet fibers collected from the McCready home shared all the same microscopic characteristics as those recovered from the bedding that the victim had been buried in. All of the evidence suggested the victim was murdered in her own home. But none of it told them who had carried out the homicide. and their best chance of linking Jack McCready to the murder turned out to be a dead end. The gun barrel had been bored out, making ballistic comparisons nearly impossible. Police had underestimated Jack McCready.
I don't see anything in there that says that it was...
The suspect had been clever enough to tamper with the one piece of evidence that could directly tie him to the murder. Or so he thought. Police contacted Richard Bisbing, a forensic microscopist with the private firm of McCrone Associates. He was asked to compare soil samples that were collected from the gravesite, Jack McCready's shovel, and from the suspect's yard.
We analyze soil samples by doing a side-by-side careful comparison of all the details that we can find in the soil itself. The soil differs by color and by the presence of plant material. It differs by its mineral content. It differs by its texture, the particle sizes in the soil grains themselves. And all of those features are compared.
Bisbing began his analysis by comparing the soil taken from McCready's shovel to samples taken from his yard. But the texture, size, color, and mineral composition of the two samples did not match. But when he compared the soil from the gravesite with the soil taken from the shovel, he found one consistency after another.
We could conclude that the soil from the shovel was similar to the gravesite and could have originated from the gravesite. And we were able to show that the place of the gravesite was different in its soil classification even from the place where the defendant lived, and the soil was different than most places in the county.
A short while later, Ohio State Police Officer Jack McCready was placed under arrest and charged with the murder of his wife, Jennifer.
233.
Though police remain unsure what drove him to murder, the evidence suggests that on the evening of September 18th, Jack McCready shot Jennifer one time in the head. To cover up his actions, he buried her in a remote spot, returned home, and altered the barrel of his gun. Despite his efforts, Jack McCready was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. Some killers will go to extraordinary lengths to distance themselves from their deeds. But no crime is perfect. And sometimes, investigators must rely on a few molecules in order to piece together the elements of murder. In Northern California, a fire rages in the middle of the night. A woman's charred body is discovered in the smoldering aftermath. But how she turned up dead remains a mystery. Detectives turn to forensic science in the hopes of uncovering the answers to their many questions. When investigators start sifting through the ashes, they have no idea it will lead to a trail of deception. This is a case of out-and-out lies, and not one, but two cold-blooded murders. When people trust their killer with their secrets, their money, and their lives, it can very well turn out to be a tragic case of misplaced loyalty. In this episode, some of the names have been changed. The city of Berkeley, California is well known for its hippie counterculture and bohemian lifestyle. Nestled in the rolling hills just across the bridge from San Francisco, it's a magnet for people of all walks of life. Criminals can hide in plain sight, making it a perfect place to cover up an insidious crime. In the early morning hours of June 25th, 1994, a loud explosion rocked the home of James Hutchings. It was 4 in the morning, and his next-door neighbor, Virginia Bailey's house, was on fire. He rushed to call the fire department, but took consolation in the knowledge that Bailey was out of town.
Yeah, there's a fire. My neighbor's house is on fire. Yes. 2912.
Do you know who lives there? Virginia Bailey? Is she at home right now? She's out of town. Okay, we're sending the fire department. We're on the way. Thank you.
Dispatchers immediately dispatched the Berkeley Fire Department to the scene. Firefighters rushed to what they thought was an unoccupied home. When they arrived, shooting flames were visible through the window. Working deliberately for several hours, the firemen extinguished the fire. Firefighters entered the house to make sure the fire was out. They noticed the majority of the damage from the blaze was in the dining room. Deputy Fire Marshal Wayne Inouye was on the scene.
When I got on the scene, I found a 2-story residential dwelling. I went into the first floor, and the first floor wasn't that badly damaged. I proceeded up to the second floor, and that's where the majority of the fire damage was. There was a lot of smoke damage on the second floor, and in the dining room, there was heavy fire damage.
Hey Chuck, shine your light in there. Over to the right. What is that? Body? Is it a body?
It was there they made a shocking discovery. A body lying face down in the smoldering debris, clearly dead.
We've got a confirmed 8900 in this location. Notify the fire marshals. Better get the coroner started up this way.
They also noticed something odd about the scene. The room was virtually without furniture, and the body was found 6 feet from the fireplace. When firefighters discover a body, they are required to notify the coroner's office. Coroner technicians arrived on the scene. They noticed the victim had severe burns on both her head and her hands. James Hutchings was shocked to learn that his neighbor might have perished in the fire.
I heard a huge explosion. Heard an explosion?
He knew Virginia was supposed to be in Salt Lake City for a wedding. And if she were home, he wondered why her car was not in the driveway.
When you looked out the window, did you see anybody out there?
No.
Anybody running from the house?
Nope, just flames.
How about
flames and a lot of smoke?
With what they learned from the neighbor, investigators now turned to science to piece together the events that led to a tragic outcome. An autopsy was performed at the State Crime Lab in Berkeley, California. Even though Virginia Bailey was reportedly out of town, forensic experts identified the body using X-rays. The victim was Virginia Bailey. She was home at the time of the fire. But other evidence quickly deemed the exam anything but routine. Upon looking at the body, the first thing the ME noticed was severe decomposition. a finding inconsistent with the person who supposedly just died.
I think I'd like to look at the x-rays. We're going to do is we're going to look this up right here.
Even more telling were maggots found in the chest cavity and on the clothing of the corpse. Maggots usually take somewhere between 24 to 48 hours to appear, and do so only on dead bodies. But there could be no logical reason they would appear on the charred body of a fire victim so soon after her death. Dr. Paul Herman of the coroner's office reviewed the autopsy results and examined the photographs.
There was something peculiar about this case because there was evidence of decomposition of the body, even to the point that there were some maggots present on the body and in the clothing, indicating that this person had died long before this fire had occurred.
Since the autopsy revealed the presence of maggots, entomologist Jeffrey Wells was brought in to help establish time of death. Due to their size, he was able to determine that Bailey died at least 3 days before she appeared to be killed in the fire.
If you estimate the age of a maggot found on a body, this gives you a pretty good minimum time since death. The reason for this is flies almost never deposit their eggs or larvae on a live person. Almost always the person must be dead when that happens. If I can estimate the age of a maggot, that gives me a minimum time since death. For example, if I pluck a maggot off of a corpse, and I am pretty sure that it is 3 days old, almost certainly that person has been dead for at least 3 days.
Dr. Wells definitively concluded that Virginia Bailey didn't die in the fire. Investigators' worst fears were coming to light. The case was now a criminal matter, and at the Berkeley Police Department, Inspector Al Bierce was assigned the file. Things clearly didn't add up, and Bierce needed to find out what or who had killed Virginia Bailey.
If she had died naturally, it would have been impossible for this fire to have occurred as a natural outgrowth of her death. For example, if she was walking across the room with some kind of a material and then suffered a heart attack, fell, started the fire, there wasn't going to be any decomposition there.
Bierce's first move was to meet with the victim's brother, who had some questions of his own. They began to create a timeline leading up to Virginia's death.
When was the last time that you talked to her by phone?
He hadn't heard from his sister for weeks before the fire.
Yes. He always got a call from his sister on his birthday. He didn't get a call. That was totally out of character for her.
Virginia and her brother were extremely close and had recently attended a friend's wedding.
Hello there. I just want both of you to know that I love
Her brother believed that something didn't sit right about his sister's disappearance.
both of you are just made for each other.
He said the two usually spoke all the time. Yet he had left messages on her answering machine and heard nothing back from her. Virginia's brother told Inspector Bierce that Christine Lloyd, Virginia's financial advisor, had been house-sitting for his sister. He also told him that some of Virginia's furniture was missing from her house.
That's all I've got for now. I know where you are down at the motel.
Inspector Bierce was faced with many questions. He was at the beginning of a complicated investigation. Bierce needed to uncover evidence to find out if someone had killed Virginia Bailey and tried to make it look like an accidental fire death.
What is that over there? You see how it goes around before it starts
And
to draw
perhaps
like that?
what he was looking for was buried in the ashes of the fire. A deadly fire ravaged the home of Virginia Bailey, and investigators grew suspicious. After only a preliminary investigation, Berkeley Police Inspector Al Bierce thought he had a murder on his hands. Autopsy reports revealed the presence of maggots on a body found at the scene of the fire. Scientists conclusively proved that Virginia Bailey had already been dead for at least 3 days before the fire started.
Watch what you touch when you come in.
Inspector Bierce decided to visit the scene of the crime firsthand. When he arrived, the fire investigator pointed out burn patterns.
There's no charring on the wood or anything, so it leads to believe that it didn't start here at the fireplace.
Things did not add up.
So this will be real important that we get this done.
They noticed evidence of pore patterns near the body.
Did we come in with a sniffer that night?
This would indicate the presence of an accelerant.
It was poured over the body.
And perhaps the most telling sign, the body was discovered over 6 feet from the fireplace.
I'm seeing it right here. Right
If the fire began in the fireplace, there should be burn marks that led to the body. There were none. The area directly surrounding the body was suspiciously intact. The investigator believed this was arson. He hoped those closest to Virginia could provide him with information as to how and why she died in the fire.
Had something I wanted to show you, to talk to you
He
about
asked
something.
Christine Lloyd, the victim's financial advisor and best friend, to meet him there.
One thing from the other day when we
She
talked
was house
about
sitting for Virginia.
how you were coming into the house. You said you came in. Any irregularities?
When
in this
Christine
area?
Lloyd arrived, she told Inspector Bierce she and Virginia were close friends, and she had been her financial advisor for about 10 years.
Everything seemed normal.
Okay.
But there was something else that I needed to
Christine was watching the house while Virginia was in San Francisco the week before the fire.
It was pretty much in place at the time.
But she said she never saw Virginia's body in the dining room.
There was something else that I needed to show.
Christine said she went back to the house right after the fire. She and a friend were there trying to rescue Virginia's items from the burned house.
Yeah, we can use that.
It was then they saw something in the downstairs apartment that Virginia usually rented.
That's not too bad.
Christine said this was unusual because the apartment was vacant. She showed Bierce what she had found in the downstairs rental unit. Christine said she was worried that someone had been staying downstairs.
Conditions.
Before the fire.
Before the fire.
She told the detective she noticed something disturbing about the condition of the rental apartment's refrigerator.
Oh my God.
Whoa.
How did this happen?
Christine Lloyd pointed out the refrigerator, and she said that just a week before, it had been totally clean and the shelves had been inside. When she showed it to me, the shelves were out of it, and there was a residue on the bottom of the refrigerator, suggestive of the fact that something had been stored there. And she was telling me that nothing had been stored there the last time she had seen it. How many days before the fire were you here?
I was here a couple of days ago.
In the bedroom, Bierce found a terrible mess.
Looks like somebody's been living in here.
There was a mattress on the floor and bottles strewn everywhere.
Look in here. Look at this.
The uninvited resident had left the apartment in disarray. The refrigerator contained what appeared to be a dark liquid residue that looked like blood. To determine what it was, crime technicians performed a luminol test. Also in the refrigerator, what appeared to be a small clump of hair riddled with maggots. Inspector Bierce had the technician remove the hair clump and take a swabbing of the red liquid.
Swab that liquid?
The samples were sent to the lab for further examination. But it was quickly determined that the substance wasn't blood and the hair did not belong to Virginia. And Bierce made another unusual discovery.
Okay.
The smoke detector for the downstairs unit had been unplugged.
Let me get a good shot of it. Good job. Okay. Get started.
This looks pretty staged.
Oh, yeah. I went into that room with a very skeptical eye, and it looked staged. That was put there so that somebody would think that somebody had been crashing there, and potentially the person who was crashing there was the person who'd gone upstairs and killed the victim.
Bierce's suspicions continued to grow. Little things about the scene troubled him, like how unusually neat, strategic, and organized the squatter's mess seemed. That despite all the bottles strewn about, there were no bottle caps. There were also no fingerprints on the bottles. To him, the whole scene felt manufactured. Jeffrey Wells examined the hair found in the refrigerator for the presence of maggots. The maggots he found were alive. Types of maggots vary. Those found in the downstairs refrigerator were scuttlefly maggots, different from the flesh fly maggots found on Virginia Bailey's body. The ones in the apartment were insects attracted to rotting food, as well as human remains. All this information troubled Inspector Bierce. But perhaps the most puzzling was the fact that Christine Lloyd said she hadn't seen Virginia's body. After all, she had been dead for at least 3 days. If the body was in the refrigerator, that would support Christine's story. But the science wasn't adding up. If the body was not hidden in the refrigerator, where had it been?
I'm saying, okay, some part of this doesn't make any sense. Either she's aware that the body is there and has played some role in the body being there, or somebody is coming in after the fact and planted the body there. It's not going to make a great deal of sense to me.
Inspector Bierce was beginning to think Christine Lloyd knew more. Perhaps she could shed more light on Virginia's whereabouts before the fire started. He decided to look a little harder at Christine's story. Virginia Bailey was found dead in her Berkeley, California home, and the circumstances surrounding her death were suspicious. The presence of maggots on the body proved she had been dead for some time before the fire. And the story told by the victim's friend, Christine Lloyd, was not adding up.
Inspector.
It looked as if Inspector Al Bierce was piecing together a murder.
So how can I help you?
Well, as we talked
The
about
detective met with her to ask her some follow-up questions.
to find out what I can about her habits. She put herself in the house every single day. She put herself into the house as late as 14 hours before the fire. I've got a coroner who's telling me, or who has told me, that the victim's dead for at least 2 days. She's found in an area where Christine Lloyd would have had to have passed through the room within feet of the body to feed the cats and to get the mail. I'm going to leave my card.
It seemed unlikely to Bierce that Virginia could have died of natural causes and lay there for days before the fire ignited.
You can call me or have them call me.
It was time to do some legwork, to learn more about the victim. Bierce began questioning friends and business associates of Virginia's. He started with her co-worker, Mary Cates, who said Virginia wasn't scheduled to go to San Francisco, as Christine had said. Mary also told Inspector Bierce that Virginia had been missing work lately.
Very much out of character, no.
Since this was completely out of character, she said she called Virginia to make sure she was okay. She left a message on her answering machine, but never received a call back from Virginia.
She informed me that...
But said Christine Lloyd called her to tell her Virginia was out of town.
I believe she was at school.
Bierce spoke to several of Virginia's friends, and they all had the same story. When they would call Virginia, they'd get a call back from Christine Lloyd.
Good.
Since Bierce determined Virginia had many friends who were concerned about her whereabouts, he found it odd that no one had actually been able to reach her in the days prior to the fire.
She had missed appointments on the 17th, 18th, and 19th?
That's correct.
One friend, Alicia Jackson, was so concerned she headed over to her house to make sure she was okay. But there was no answer. Only a note on the door saying she was in San Francisco. She thought this was odd, but left her own note, hoping to hear back from her missing friend.
We're obviously
Bierce was puzzled.
hearing from anybody we can.
Although all her friends were being helpful, no one offered anything that gave the investigation focus.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you for coming.
Virginia's brother came back to the police station and offered up a charred piece of evidence. It was Virginia's answering machine, presumably full of messages from concerned friends.
Fire damage to the cassette, pretty well warped.
Inspector Bierce sent the tape to the DOJ crime lab in the hopes of salvaging the burned cassette.
Not sure what we're going to be able to get out.
Perhaps the messages on the machine would lead to answers as to why every time someone tried to make contact with Virginia, they made contact with Christine Lloyd instead.
Be in touch with what we get.
Bierce ran a background check on Christine Lloyd. She came up clean, except for a minor traffic violation. Since Christine was Virginia's financial advisor, Inspector Bierce decided to get a warrant to examine the victim's financial records.
Come on in. Okay. Have a seat.
Bierce went to Virginia's bank for answers. Years of experience taught Bierce, study a victim's finances and you'll likely uncover a motive. Virginia's bank activity had reached a fever pitch in the weeks before her death. Large checks were written against Virginia's account, not only to Christine, but also to a woman named Myrtle Lloyd.
About 50% of the proceeds of that account went to Christine Lloyd.
One peculiar thing Bierce noted was a certified foreclosure letter dated the 13th of June. Christine was responsible for making sure all of the bills were paid on time.
Certified mail.
And she had given him no indication that Virginia was in such severe financial trouble.
Card when she opened the bank.
And another red flag. Something that made no sense for a woman who was in dire financial straits and about to lose her home. A flurry of checks written in June. The end of a 6-month spending spree totaling thousands of dollars. In total, 4 checks were made out to Christine and Myrtle Lloyd. Some dated after Virginia's death. Bierce believed he found a motive. Embezzlement. Now he needed some kind of smoking gun. Bierce asked Virginia's manager for ATM surveillance tapes at Virginia's bank.
More checks to draw. I will get back to you with...
He also pored over every financial document he could find.
Do we have one for bleach and...
And there, among the detailed receipts from Virginia's account, came a startling discovery.
One for 2136.
Inspector Bierce found receipts for both an accelerant and a garden hose.
Given the date of that purchase and the fact that an accelerant was very possibly used in the ignition of the fire, it provided a nexus between that purchase and the fact that the fire had occurred.
It looked as if Christine had been using Virginia's account. And the purchase of 2 40-ounce cans of lighter fluid and a hose on her account just days before the fire was quickly turning friend into suspect.
Oh, we can put it.
Can you hook it up?
Yeah.
Bierce's next step was to watch the surveillance video provided by Virginia's bank.
Have you queued this up already?
Yeah, this is already queued up.
It contained no surprise. clear as day, there was Christine Lloyd signing Virginia's checks and deposit slips on checks made out to herself. The checks were in the exact amount of Virginia's missing mortgage payments. One of the checks was dated 3 days before Virginia's death, yet it was cashed 3 days after her death. It was made out to Myrtle Lloyd. Bierce needed to know who this woman was and if she and Christine were working together to steal Virginia's money. Since their last names were the same, he presumed the two were related. Bierce did a records check on Myrtle Lloyd. What he found out was perhaps the most disturbing thing yet in this perplexing case. Myrtle Lloyd was Christine's mother, and Myrtle Lloyd was dead. It appeared that Christine was not only signing checks on Virginia's account for herself, she was also signing checks made out to a dead woman, her own mother. Bierce visited with the Oakland police, who looked into Myrtle Lloyd's death. He wanted details. Captain Ralph Lacer of the Oakland Police Department remembered her story. He told Bierce that Myrtle had been found dead in her bathtub with severe bruises to her face and lacerations to her head.
And she was doing some financial things for her, and it's looking right now like she was taking...
Because there were no obvious signs of foul play, and police believed Christine's story, the coroner ruled Myrtle's death an accident.
After finding no sign of forced entry in the residence, there was no loss in the residence, or no one appeared to have kind of rummaged through the residence. It came out that we didn't see anything that showed it was a hands of another, and at this point they ruled that it was an accidental death.
Maybe would have come across as an accidental death, but knowing what I
Then Bierce learned that Christine Lloyd had found her mother's body.
That she had seen the mother the day before, and that she had left and done some shopping, and then she was bringing some groceries back to the house.
According to the July 1991 police reports, Christine Lloyd said she returned home from the grocery store.
Hello? What's the grocery store, yeah? Mom?
She was surprised when her mom was nowhere to be found.
Mom? Mom? Mom?
It was when she entered the bathroom that she made the startling discovery of her mother's body. Then, things just clicked for the detective. He instinctively knew he had a second murder on his hands, and he was determined to get the evidence necessary to prove it. While investigating the death of Virginia Bailey,
that was my first impression.
Inspector Al Bierce believed he had uncovered another murder, and he was convinced the same killer committed both crimes. The woman who had been so helpful from the beginning was now a suspect.
At that point in the investigation, I knew that she'd killed my victim in Berkeley, and I knew that she had killed her mother 3 years before. And I knew that she had done a very good job of concealing that death 3 years ago to make it look like an accidental death, not murder.
He was beginning to put it all together, but there were still some unanswered questions. Bierce went to the Oakland coroner's office to find out more. Dr. Paul Herman performed the autopsy on Myrtle Lloyd.
When I walked in the bathroom, I would have expected to find a great deal of blood spattered about in the bathroom because of these injuries to the head.
This was not what he thought he'd find. After all, the victim had severe head wounds. There should have been blood everywhere. But then Dr. Herman saw the smallest of clues. He also noticed more signs that the scene had been meticulously cleaned.
This bathroom was clean. The water had been drained from the tub, and there was some debris from decomposition and probably blood at the bottom of the tub, but no spattering of blood around there at all. And that's what I would have expected to see. And expose the bone. But there are
Myrtle
others that are
Lloyd was
horizontal,
killed
so
by
they
7
obviously
separate
didn't
lacerations
all
to the back of her head.
one way. There had to be either movement of the head
Christine
or
explained
movement
that her
by the
mother was
assailant
prone to seizures and said that she had fallen in the bathtub.
And in addition, she had a laceration of her forehead, which
Bierce knew things were not adding up.
fractures.
And after visiting Oakland, his suspicions about Christine escalated.
As you can see, some of these lacerations.
He believed the crime scene was too neat, almost in direct contrast to the scene in Berkeley.
Yeah, they're on both sides, and some of
But both appeared staged nonetheless.
they're crosswise across the back of the head.
To test their suspicions, investigators spoke with Myrtle Lloyd's doctors to determine if she had been ill or had any known conditions that would make her unsteady on her feet.
Physical exams.
What they found out would break the cold case wide open. Myrtle was in excellent health and had no history of seizures. By now, Detective Bierce was convinced of Christine Lloyd's guilt. He was ready to make an arrest. What he needed was a charge. At this point, there was not enough direct evidence to make a murder arrest. Since Christine had signed Virginia Bailey's name on checks, his best bet was forgery. He turned to handwriting expert Verl Truman, a forensic document examiner with the U.S. Postal Inspection Service, and asked him to look at the checks for fraud.
Handwriting examination is basically a side-by-side comparison. The basis for the identification of handwriting is the fact that no two persons share the same combination of individual identifying handwriting characteristics. We look for various features and habits of the writer. We look for the way the person makes beginning strokes, ending strokes, or connecting strokes between letters and letter combinations. We look at things such as the relative height ratio and proportion of letters and in relation to other letters.
He found subtle differences between their handwriting styles, which Truman said were patterns and traits that every individual develops over the years.
Now these characteristics, it's very difficult to cast off your habits when you're either imitating the handwriting of another person or if you're trying to disguise your own writing. Usually some of your habits will still show through.
And Christine was unable to completely disguise hers. But perhaps the most telling sign was not an actual letter or a word,
Notice that she makes a star
but a unique and personal signature symbol.
This one, which I believe is Virginia Bailey used a star as a dollar sign in her writing, and she constructed that character beginning and ending at the lower left corner or 7 o'clock position. Christine Lloyd, on the other hand, did it completely opposite. She began it and started it at the lower right. That was a feature that she just happened to miss.
Inspector Bierce now had proof of forgery. But what he needed was proof of murder. Bierce decided to take another look at the days prior to the fire. Christine was the only one with Virginia's house key, and the only one who seemed to know anything about Virginia's whereabouts. She had even been returning Virginia's phone messages. At the State Crime Lab, technicians worked to restore the message tape from Virginia Bailey's answering machine.
Sticking around, I'll play this.
Investigators were now able to retrieve the messages, although they had no idea what they'd find. By comparing the phone records to the voice messages, Inspector Bierce was able to piece together the chain of events leading up to and following Virginia's murder.
Hey, Virginia, it's me. I haven't heard from you in a while. Where are you? Call me.
The calls reflected a growing concern about Virginia's disappearance on June 13th, 12 days before the fire. And oddly, many of the outgoing calls Bierce found on Virginia's phone records began on that very day.
There was information that came to me during the course of the investigation that suggested that the victim had died on June 13th. That was the last time anybody ever talked to her, and it was the time through phone records that I showed that she had made a call to Christine.
The pieces were falling into place. Bierce felt he was close to being able to make an arrest. He paid a visit to another one of Virginia's neighbors, Sam Watson. Watson told of helping Christine carry a large dining room table, as well as other items, from Virginia's house before the fire. She then sold them at a yard sale.
You selling this table too?
Christine had denied having any idea what had happened to that table.
Hello.
Hi, how are you? Good, good.
I guess it was about 2 days before.
Every part of Christine Lloyd's story seemed suspect. Investigators believed she was in a frenzy of greed, intent on fully taking over her friend's assets through any means possible.
Step towards me, ma'am. Step towards me. Keep walking. You do stop. Turn around with your back towards me. Face the house. Face the house.
In early December of 1994, Inspector Al Bierce arrested Christine Lloyd for murder and took her into custody.
Take you to the car. Do you have any weapons? Do you have knives, guns?
Bierce was convinced that Christine Lloyd had masterminded 2 murders.
Hey, Christine?
But he only had enough evidence to bring her in for the murder of Virginia Bailey. He believed she was motivated by money and greed.
You have the right to remain silent. Anything
And he wanted to see Christine Lloyd behind bars.
You have the right to an attorney. To have that attorney
Christine
present.
Lloyd refused to speak to police. She refused to take a polygraph test.
You understand those rights as I...
Instead, she asked for her attorney. She was processed into the system. Although Christine Lloyd was sticking to her guns regarding Virginia Bailey, when asked about her mother, she shook her head and told Bierce he was wrong. She said she was a loving daughter who doted on her mother and would never do anything to harm her. Apparently, Christine Lloyd was convincing. At the time of the arrest, the district attorney's office didn't feel comfortable going ahead and prosecuting the case.
What's your name? Christine.
They didn't feel the evidence was strong enough to get a conviction. Her immediate release was ordered.
Please check and make sure everything is there.
As she walked out of the jail, Inspector Al Bierce despaired.
I knew that she had embezzled from her mother, leading up to the murder of her mother. I knew that she had embezzled from my victim, leading to her murder. And from a personal standpoint, that wasn't something I could let go of.
Convinced he was dealing with a murderer who had already killed twice, Inspector Bierce wasn't about to let it rest.
Yes, you are.
He needed more evidence. He turned to forensic scientists to help him bring this killer to justice. Berkeley County investigator Al Bierce pieced together a story of greed, lies, and murder. He was convinced Christine Lloyd killed both her best friend and her own mother. Now, Despite nearly a year on the case, hundreds of hours of legwork and compelling evidence,
Please check and make sure.
he was watching her go free.
Yes, you are.
I knew she was guilty, and I couldn't let go.
Night, guys. Night, Glenn.
Al Bierce was now working all hours, trying to plug any holes in what he thought was an airtight case against Christine Lloyd.
Right, Al, let's go.
The district attorney's office refused to prosecute the case, stating the evidence was circumstantial and it would not hold up in court. But Al Bierce had worked too hard to let this one slip through his fingers.
By the time I got through, when I was at that point in the investigation, I knew that she'd killed my victim in Berkeley, and I knew that she had killed her mother 3 years before. And I knew that she had done a very good job of concealing that death 3 years ago to make it look like an accidental death, not murder.
Bierce approached Thomas Rogers, the head of the trial staff at the DA's office in Alameda County. After hearing the details of Bierce's investigation, he too became determined to bring the case to justice.
I made a commitment that I was going to try the case. In our business, many of the cases are much more interesting than what we see on television. There's a tremendous human drama involved. For anybody who's curious, you have a woman who's 55 years old with no record. Why did she kill her best friend?
This was the question puzzling investigators for over a year.
Hello, Al. Tom Rogers.
But as Bierce and Rogers discovered, it all came down to money.
When he went through the receipts, he should be done.
Christine Lloyd had been cashing her mother's civil service pension checks. And the men believed that once Virginia Bailey confronted Christine about the house foreclosure, it was only a matter of time before authorities began looking into Christine's finances and found out about Myrtle Lloyd. But despite all the circumstantial evidence, the clear motive of embezzlement, and the testimony of the handwriting analyst, it would be a tough case to try. There was no cause of death, no eyewitnesses, no smoking gun. D.A. Rogers decided to take one last look at the pile of evidence Inspector Bierce had uncovered. After weeks of combing through the findings, he was convinced. The final link to justice and punishment would come down to a tiny piece of living evidence.
The most compelling evidence was the entomology evidence. If we did not have the entomology evidence, we never would have been able to prove the case.
The fact that maggots will only feed on a dead body was the only piece of conclusive proof that Virginia was dead long before the fire. But it was the proof that made Rogers feel comfortable enough to try the case. And it was the one hole in Christine Lloyd's story which all the other lies would come rushing through. She placed herself in the house during the time of Virginia's death and the time of the fire. This would be the crux of the prosecutor's case. That Christine Lloyd had committed Virginia Bailey's murder and spent 2 weeks manufacturing an elaborate crime scene to cover her tracks. In July of 1995, 1 year after the fire that killed her best friend, Virginia Bailey, Christine Lloyd was once again arrested.
Are there any weapons?
Right to remain silent.
But this time, she was headed to trial. Once again, Lloyd refused to speak to the man who had made it his mission to put her behind bars.
You're getting one more chance at your side of the story. It was a pretty quiet trip coming in.
But by now, Bierce and D.A. Rogers had fully patched together what had happened to Virginia Bailey and the events leading up to her murder.
Assuming you're not going to be talking to me.
Near trial, we re-investigated and were able to prove through statements and circumstantial evidence that clearly Christine Lloyd had killed her mother. And that the motive then for killing Virginia Bailey was to avoid a re-examination of the mother's death.
Virginia Bailey had no idea her dear friend Christine Lloyd had been embezzling from her. So when she came home on the afternoon of June 13th, 1994, to find a registered foreclosure note from her bank, Virginia was undoubtedly surprised and angry.
She panicked. She phoned Christine and she said, you know, you're my financial advisor. What is the deal here? There was a 3.5-minute call to Christine's house in Martinez.
At that point, Christine knew she was caught, and it wouldn't be long before everyone knew the deadly secrets she had been hiding for 3 years. She showed up at the house intent on murder.
The bank, they're foreclosing on the house. They wrote the checks out in paper.
Using a blunt object, she brutally struck Virginia until she was dead. It would now be up to a jury to determine if Christine Lloyd was the murderous woman Al Bierce was convinced she was. But Al Bierce also wanted justice for Myrtle Lloyd and uncovered that Christine was the sole beneficiary of a $100,000 life insurance policy. So as Christine sat in jail awaiting trial for one murder, the investigation continued on the second. This was enough to indict once again for murder. Driven by the same greed, Christine had inflicted a beating on her elderly mother. Christine Lloyd was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of arson. She received 2 consecutive life sentences. In planning, executing, and covering up their crimes, sometimes murderers think too much. Sometimes it is this over-planning that leads investigators to their front doors. And as long as those investigators are listening for clues, they'll have the forensic resources to back up their hunches. And clever killers will continue to be brought to justice.